The Fire Investigator is a survivor released in April the 30th, 2024. And that survivor doesn't seem to have a good reputation gameplay-wise in the IDV community, as he seems as quite weak. But I have decided that I would, myself, practice and master that character to his full potential to see why he is such an underdog to the IDV community. Before getting into the main topic of the video, what is an underdog? According to Google, it is pretty much a competitor thought to have little chance of winning a fight or contest, which could describe the situation of the Fire Investigator in the current state of the game, but we'll see later. Alright, so a good start will be to review the abilities of the Fire Investigator. First, he carries two passives, which one of them work with his main ability being the airbags. He is able to throw an airbag that will act as an obstacle, which will serve as an infinite dash giver to survivors who move into it, but it is breakable by the hunter with a charge attack. The concept of the ability is already good at first glance, with the airbags being a way to give free distance to your teammate, but then we realize that the Fire Investigator only carries two, so you can just place them strategically without the risk of permanently losing them. Which is why we are able to deflate the airbags to pick them up. And of course, if you lose all two items, you cannot carry any other items, making you basically a survivor with no power. So you will need to use these airbags wisely. Another analysis we can make out of the airbags is that they can be used to body block, since they act as an obstacle, but also push. So they are kind of more versatile than simple dash givers. Like, they are able to block basement stairs to potentially prevent the basement chair. Let's talk about the passives now. The first one being temporary threshold shift, which gives a 5% decoding debuff to the Fire Investigator, but it also makes you able to gain up to 10% of decoding buff if you contain the hunter, so if you catch him. And yes, the effects that the passive gives you is very minimal, but it can help sometimes, let's say. I guess this had some side quest to the Fire Investigator to gain a buff, instead of just, let's say, decode. He could support and maybe get a few stacks. His second passive, being firefighting training, grants him a 10% faster interaction speed, which is not to mix with voting speed, and that means that the 10% should affect a larger amount of interaction. A reduced cooldown too, when using the airbags to propulse yourself, which is basically a dash, from 15 seconds to 10 seconds for the Fire Investigator, alongside a 2 seconds of 50% speed boost, which make using the airbags very powerful with the Fire Investigator. Although the survivors don't get the same treatment when using the airbags, they just get the dash, but not the speed boost. So how do we put this ability to practice? I noticed when playing Fire Investigator that you heavily rely on your teammate to make the most use of your airbags, so your game plan may differ depending on if you're solo queuing or playing in a team. For example, let's say you're playing in solo queue. You would rather not place your airbags strategically like a toy merchant, but keep them for later. You won't play like a toy merchant as the airbags aren't as strong as your catapults, so putting them with no coordination may result in then giving low result and also losing these airbags along the way. So it can be more harmful for you because then you will become weaker since you have less airbags to prepare yourself and you cannot carry any other items if you happen to lose all your airbags. So when I wanna put these airbags for support, I make sure that it will give enough value for it to be useful. Like the distance between two kiting areas aren't that big, so I could place an airbag. Or when the gates are open to be decoded, I place an airbag in case the hunter teleports, and so my teammates or I can use the airbag to get away from the gate to avoid being hit early after the hunter teleport or comes to the gate. Of course, this only applies to long-term usage of the airbags, like you wanna place them for a long time. However, for supports, you have multiple choice, since the airbags is kind of versatile on this port. Like, you could throw an airbag in front of your teammate so they use it to dash away, but you could also block the hunter way, or even just push the hunter since the airbags have a push effect when they inflate in front of a character. All three ways to use the airbags works very well during support. And that itself basically tells us that Fire Investigator has a great potential for harass. Like his low cooldown of 10 seconds means that he will be able to harass as long as the batter can, but he has to prevent his airbags from being destroyed, just like batter. However, his pushing effect is weaker because he doesn't push as far and you can balloon rescue a teammate from pushing the hunter while he's picking a survivor, of course. And one last thing I want to talk about support with Fire Investigator and solo queue is that while blocking path is very strong, it basically confirms a lost airbag, which is something you don't really want to do. At best, you will want the hunter to move out their way to destroy the airbag, so you don't waste it for nothing. Well, we have talked about support and harass quite a long time. Let's now talk about kiting. Kiting with Fire Investigator is not that hard. You have plenty of choice when deciding to kite, which makes you able to adapt to literally most hunter. Like you could just place an airbag to gain distance and dash, or you could simply block a path from the hunter to raw kite around a simple area and just transition when the hunter is trying to break it. So you know there's plenty of ways to kite using. A big but it is hard to actually keep your airbag while kiting. And trying to keep your airbag may be one of the most important things to do with Fire Investigator, because the moment you run, I've said it multiple times, you run out of airbags, you become practically a simple survivor with no ability. So there exist multiple techs to use your airbag and not lose them at the same time, but we're going to talk about it later. So as for rescue, with Fire Investigator, you can place an airbag for a teammate that you rescue to use after they're rescued, or you could use an airbag to reach the shell faster. These sort of things are basically patterns I've noticed when I practiced Fire Investigator in rank and got better with him, and so I could conclude that the Fire Investigator can contribute a lot to the team with his abilities. However, there is that one part that could decide if Fire Investigator is kind of a character you would pick because he is consistent Haney's gameplay, unlike Lucky Guy, you know? And so, while playing Fire Investigator, of course, I have noticed that one thing that can be very annoying when playing Fire Investigator, and it is pretty much the behavior of the airbag when you throw them not in the open but against a wall, something like that. And the problem comes when it starts to bugs and not be placed where you want it to be because of a weird thing that happened when the airbags collide with an obstacle or a wall. But even though there's this thing that can happen, you can try to learn a little bit of its behavior to try to avoid situations like that. It's now time to talk about his strengths and weaknesses, as it is important to analyze these parts of a character to then see if they are worth being picked for the win. The first weaknesses of Fire Investigator is of course his very limited resources. The airbags are good items, but they might run out very quickly and limits you in terms of possible value to achieve, and that leads to our second weaknesses, which is how Fire Investigator cannot carry any other items, meaning if he runs out of airbags, he becomes a slightly buffed base kit survivor, which isn't much. Third weaknesses, which relate to what I said earlier, is how the airbags have unpredictable behavior when colliding with obstacle or placed near obstacle. And that lack of perfect control may affect your teammate and even you, although that is just a Fire Investigator problem and not really a weakness, but I would count it still. Now for his strength. And the strength are kind of very powerful. Like, the Fire Investigator is clearly a jack of all trades. There is no category where he isn't affected. For decoding, he has a minus 5% debuff of decoding speed, but he can boost it to 5% decoding speed buff by simply kiting the hunter or doing support, basically. Which means he will get a slight advantage in decoding. He also has a faster vaulting speed, which means his raw kiting will be better than most survivors, and his airbags are all around ability that can help rescuing, kite, support, harass, and yeah, that's about it, which is already big. And that is without counting the fact that his airbags are also very jack of all trade type thing. It can block exits, push, and give effect to your teammate, basically acting as totems. And that's pretty much it for the strength. Although we can see that there's more weaknesses than strength, being able to adapt is a strength that makes Fire Investigator quite a hard character to counter. He is like Lucky Guy without the lucky part when it comes to being versatile. That brings us to the question, what will make him a good asset for your team? I may have said this a lot, but the main trait of Fire Investigator is being a versatile tool that can adapt to most situations, if not every. So by bringing Fire Investigator, you hope to have a decent character, but also a decent support, who is able to adapt to most situations, like if they have to support against a Percy or against a breaking wheel. let's now talk about the techs that you can use with Fire Investigator. So before doing that, I want to say that when talking about a character, the texts are a big part of what you should talk about, because these texts make so you can make your character a little bit better by exploiting his game mechanics, and so they usually give good results, or at worst very low, but they usually help making your character better. Or should I say, just use your character at his max potential. The first tech is a weird tech, I would say, because it happens when you deflate an airbag at the right time, making the hunter not hit you even though you're right in front of them. Let's just rewind just to see it more clearly. So you can see the hunter attacking and I deflate at the right time, and for some reason I don't get hit. I couldn't reproduce it, but I also did it to enable retrieval. I lied a bit when I say I could reproduce it. I did once with a Mad Eyes on an alternate account, but I couldn't do it anymore after. I just don't know how it works, but there is a tech. The second tech I found is blocking the pallet, but on your side. So the hunter has to break it to go through. But since you're a pallet, you can basically drop it, and yeah, they can't do anything about it. And if they try to break your airbag, you just deflate it, then drop the pallet. That's as easy as it is. The third take is not that special. Basically, it is the way you throw the airbag. So you know, when you throw it or you just drop the airbag near you, it has a slight delay when you drop it before it inflates. But when you throw it, it inflates instantly. Just look there. So you see there's a delay. However, if you throw the bag, then it will instantly pop or inflate. So there is kind of this small tech where if you throw the airbag near you, but not just on your spot, it will instantly inflate. The last tech I found is when you emote or hold your skill button, you don't activate the dash interaction with the airbag. You may find that a bit useless, but there's really plenty of use. Like if you wanna place yourself to have a good dash that will give you the most distance, then you will probably wanna use this little tech to place yourself, or position yourself for a very good dash, which is better than nothing, of course. Something I wanna tackle about Fire Investigator the most is the difficulty part. Difficulty is one big part of being somewhat of an underdog, as the harder a character is, the more people tend to drop the character, because it requires way too much effort to win with. So it will be kind of easy to obtain a biased view about a character that you haven't even played at their full potential. However, it's not to say that the character doesn't have any flaw because you haven't mastered that character. Of course, there's still some noticeable flaw. But I think it's a good time to talk about how your team is very important as Fire Investigator, because he is way better when you play coordinated. And that's because of the Fire Investigator versatility. Like, you have to tell your teammate what you want to do, because there's multiple ways you could deal with a situation. So communication will help your team greatly. Also, there's the usage of Fire Investigator itself, which isn't easy. Like for your airbags, to push a hunter, you have to place your airbags at a place where after it inflates, the hunter will be near enough that it will be pushed away. It's easy on some tight corner or on tight areas, but on open areas it might be a little bit harder, let's say. And adds with the multiple tech that you can have to master and use during your match without failing too much, then you have a character that is a little bit complex, not only with knowledge and skill, but with how you will use your character, talking about game sense. Let's not forget the resource management that you have to do with your airbags, making sure that you don't quickly lose them and become weak. So in short, we can make a summary of the difficulty of Fire Investigator because of his support, team reliability, resource management, and his multiple techniques that you can have to master itself. Overall, it should be very easy to get with Fire Investigator, so that won't be the difficult part. Now I think it is time to conclude this video to answer our first question. Why is he such an underdog? The Fire Investigator is definitely a character who is not cheesy or easy to play, not mainly due to his skill floor, but due to the game sense you need to possess to use your ability wisely. Most people find his lack of resource a big weakness, but them being a permanent tools, if not broken, is a way for the devs to tell you that you can use them again, but just don't throw them everywhere. His abilities are strong for getting, of course. Fire Investigator does demand you to know his kit very well, and also have the skill to use them for something other than just placing an airbag in front of you to dash away. The reliability part of your teammate make your full potential not obtainable often. Of course, there are slight value you obtain by doing well, which isn't easy to do, that might frustrate players because there are characters that gives greater results with lower effort, like Antiquarian or Prospector, with stunts that can actually balloon rush you. Personally, over the course of trying to master Fire Investigator, I just don't find him as bad as I often see him depicted as in the community. Sure, he isn't overpowered, but does that being a somewhat fair survivor, rarely that bad. He's in the middle ground in strength, and I believe it's a good thing for this game, with the last meta-dumped characters that happen, like Heavy, Ivy, Opera Singer, and Aeroplanes. At worst, he could be middle-low tier, but I would personally consider him high middle tier if mastered. What do you think?